Thanks so much for joining us today on another episode of Winning Through Culture. I'm Amanda Kramer, and we're looking forward to sharing with you one of our greatest hits. Our greatest hits series is really focused on bringing back relevant and impactful episodes that have really helped build winning through culture and that you have found to be most impactful in your business.
I am excited to be here today with Thom Shea. Thom is the president, CEO, and founder of Adamantine Alliance, a unique leadership and human performance dynamic training organization. Thom is also a retired Navy SEAL, the author of Unbreakable, a Navy SEAL's Way of Life, and also has an upcoming book, which is entitled 3 Simple Things, Leading Through Chaos, which we'll talk a little bit about today. He's also a father, a wonderful husband, and a good friend of mine. And Thom, I'm excited to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thanks, Tim, for letting me be a part of what you're doing. And I do miss our conversations that we used to have every week. Now they're few and far between, but I miss them.
Well, we'll talk about leading through chaos. And my commitment is we got to get those conversations going again. It's been a crazy time. We're recording this in early April 2020. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 virus that's shutting the world down. And, the title of this podcast is Winning Through Culture. And I know as most of our conversations go, I think we're going to go one way and we'll end up going another way. So we're going to free flow this one. I do think it'd be great, though, for people to hear a little bit more about you and your story. How did you transition from being a Navy SEAL into being an entrepreneur? And maybe we'll start there and take it from there. How's that sound?
Wonderful.
Perfect.
I'll try to do what you just said with some type of justice. I guess it's been 6 years, since I retired.
Yeah. I
had spent 23 years in the SEAL teams and retired as a senior chief. And I guess the data of that is I was gone. I was on 2 different teams. I was a SEAL instructor for a long period of time. And I had been in interesting enough, a culture of very committed people that put everything on the table, even their lives, to succeed. And the transition, which is what you're asking about, was brutal for myself and my family because I had lost a sense of identity and culture. I had dropped the culture that I had grown up in. It had ended in 2014 and I retired. And I initially set out to try to find other people that were operating and living at the level that I had experienced in the teams. And oddly enough, that in the first year, we found each other, and you were somebody who represented to me somebody that I had lost, somebody that leads, somebody that cares about people, not just in conversation, but in reality. And the 5 years that we have spent together had represented to me a replacement of the culture that I had left in the SEAL teams. In the meantime, I wrote a book to my family called Unbreakable that became 6 years ago a national bestseller. And I think that's how we met, as you had read it and then reached out to me fortuitously.
Yeah, that story, I do want to tell that because I think it's interesting in the sense that I had just finished reading that book. I was on an airplane to a business meeting in Las Vegas, and I had read in the end of the book that you lived in Greenville, South Carolina, and I said, I have got to meet this guy. For those of you that are listening to this and haven't read the book, you need to read it. It's as a reader, myself of many, many books, it stood out to me as a very unique story and a unique perspective on how to come at life. And literally, I finished reading the book and returned to my work. I was on Wi-Fi on the airplane doing email. I get an email from a mutual acquaintance of ours. And he says, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? This was a Sunday. He says, tomorrow I've got a guy that just left the SEAL teams. He's going to be in Charlotte, and I really want you to meet him. And I said, well, that's funny. I just read a book by a Navy SEAL, and his name's Thom Shea. And the guy said, that's him. And I said, all right, I think we need to meet.
I always think that story is funny. It's how things actually connect with ease sometimes.
Well, and I think it goes to, and again, for those that have not read the book, as they read it, it goes to one of your 5 pyramids of human performance, spiritual connection. And that's something that you've taught me well. And truthfully, I think it speaks very directly to that. So that was the beginning of our journey together. And I think that as we have shared with one another, we've both taught each other an awful lot. And I have brought many of the things that you taught me when we first met that day down in Greer, South Carolina. I didn't know what you looked like, but as I saw you coming down the street, I was like, that's got to be him. Mm-hmm. And we sat and had a cup of coffee in a little coffee shop there and had a conversation again, kind of unlike anything I'd ever had with anyone. But what stood out to me was very clearly, both from reading your book and then from meeting you that day, is you had an awful lot to offer the business world with what you had learned in the SEAL community and the culture of the SEAL community. And I'd like to maybe spend a little bit of time on that. I mean, how, your journey at that point was really getting to figure out what was next. And you did become an entrepreneur, a speaker, a coach, a trainer of executive leadership teams. That transition, how did you pull some of the culture of the SEAL community into the business community? And early on, what did you learn about culture in businesses?
One thing I realized, I think in the first month, so I'd gotten out in January of 14 into an empty space that didn't look like my life for 23 years. I had met some entrepreneurs and some successful businessmen and women. And I quickly realized I was so far behind the curve on being an expert in a particular field that for me to go become an expert, like in sales, for instance, or underwater welding or whatever a specialty would be, I would have to really hurt my family to do that. I would have to take 100 steps back. And through the mentorship of some really great men and women at the time, they had asked me, what had I learned in the SEAL teams that I could translate into this next step? The answer was people. And the SEAL teams are only based on people because technology changes so rapidly in the SEAL teams. You can't base anything on a current technology because in a year it's going to change. Tactics changed with the coming of the tide. But the people were the center point of success in the SEAL teams. And I had not thought of it that way until I was posed with that question. And so what I had to resolve for myself was, can I understand that relative to be able to teach it to somebody else and share those experiences that I had had either leading or following? And that's what I decided to do in month 3 is I'm going to begin to share the team style leadership of focusing on people to the business community. And I didn't think it was that unique until I began to speak of it to organizations. And I got a sense that people were not the center focus of many companies. Bottom line and top line isn't a people-focused metric. And so as I began to speak and be able to put it into a curriculum-based program, we massively began to impact by affecting people, the top and bottom line of organizations. And so what I'd done is I just decided that I'm pretty good at understanding how to teach people to be very effective in what you mentioned earlier, the 5 areas of life, which are their health, their ability to learn, their ability to grow or do business, so to speak. Oddly, relationships at home was the most profound impact on bottom and top line in a company, is how well the boss or the CEO conducts business at home. And then the final thing was the spiritual growth of the individual. So those 5 areas I put into a curriculum and took that to market.
And I was fortunate enough to be one of your early students.
Yeah, and you survived it, which I couldn't believe.
Well, I was a slow study, slow learner, but I think that the things that came out of that experience for me have certainly made me not only a better leader, but a better person, better husband. To your point, it was really profound in the formation ultimately and the shift of my focus as a leader. I've always been a people person, yet in a business world, to your point, there's a lot more focus on numbers and almost things over people. And I was kind of caught up in that at the time we met, and I was focused on, how do we grow this business? What do we do? What are the processes and procedures that make us unique? And that's when the shift really started to take place for me, when I realized through our work, it's the culture of the organization, which really is the people you have in the organization and the behaviors of who they are and how you show up together every day that makes a difference. So, with that as a backdrop, I'm curious if you could share a little bit about the evolution of what you've seen in your work with, both a healthy culture and a culture that doesn't really allow for thriving organization.
The one thing that I realized first working with you and then with many other CEOs is there was probably a disaggregate or ineffective definition of culture. And everybody had their own unique definition, which makes it weird. So if everybody has a different definition for the same word, something is amiss. And so what I realized is that you had to find a way to define what a culture is and have a way to measure it over time through actions. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways to measure culture is who is actually there in the culture. So call culture a team. So how do you measure the effectiveness of the people in that team? And one simple way to measure it that keeps people connected is the actual physical health of the team. Saying it in SEAL terms, is everybody fit to a certain level that they can endure the demands that business requires of them? Oddly enough, when your health is somewhat controllable, you find it an advantage to stay on that team. Like, for instance, this is a learning thing that I'm trying to explain. If I was out of shape and you were asking me as one of your employees to produce a result, you as the boss wouldn't realize that my results that I'm producing is because I'm not in shape. So when a company allows for the conversation of everybody begin to be fit, then the requirements and demands of that business can actually move up. Like if I stop paying attention at 9 o'clock in the morning and I've been there for an hour because I have high blood pressure or I'm tired because I don't eat well, my productivity is terrible the rest of the day. And it affects top, bottom line, and it affects how I interact with people. And companies have a hard time looking at that, probably because of HR or whatever the restrictions are, is you can't say, hey, we're going to be in charge of each other's health. So when that began to be a conversation of a way to measure culture, and you can do something about that. You don't have to just say, be fit and have no metric to it. Allow for a fitness conversation through diet or through activity. And the company then looks at its metrics differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing I realized that it's funny to talk about is productivity wise, me being on point and really doing my job. You can't get an 8-hour day out of anybody. You can't. It's an impossibility, but people are paid on the 8-hour day. So most productivity stops organizationally by noon. Wow. I'm tapped out. I can't pay attention. So when you look at a culture, you have to look at that honestly. And that was the first metric. And then my experience through you first, and then every single client after you, was the profound nature of the success of the company is how well the boss, male or female, has a profound relationship at home. Mm-hmm. In dummy SEAL terms, you can make $1 billion, and if you don't control what's going on at home, you're going to cut half of that off at some point in time. And so when I started doing the training with you, I realized that for us to adjust and deal with what was going on at home would have impact of every employee in your company just by you having a great relationship at home. I think it went well.
No, I think that's a great point, and that maybe I can expound on that from a personal perspective, that first thing on the health side, when we met, and I won't tell the whole story because it's a little too long and some people may find it boring, but I had broken my leg. It's 9 years ago now. And I used to be a runner. And on our first meeting together, when we were talking about physical fitness, I said, I used to be a runner. You said, no, you are a runner. And I said, no, Tom, I can't run anymore. I used to be a runner. And, I went out and ran 8 miles that weekend on a leg that hadn't seen any kind of stress for several years. But that, after another 6 months of physical therapy, led to you and I running a half marathon together, which did open up so much for me as far as teaching me. Because again, I guess you could technically just go out and run a half marathon, but it's everything you do to prepare for that you really learn about fitness and gain the benefit from. And that led me to seeking a even more interesting challenge, which led me into Spartan racing. That was where you said, hey, I've had enough obstacle courses in my life as a SEAL. I'm not going to go do that with you, but have fun. Mm-hmm. And that led me to putting the team together at the firm level of people that were interested in doing something like that and having that experience together. And candidly, I've learned a lot through you and your mentorship, and then through the experience of Spartan racing about hydration, rest, nutrition, wellness that I never would have had. And I'm sitting here in a very stressful time, like everyone is, with this COVID-19 thing, and realizing that I'm drawing on the strength physically of all of the last 3 years of my training. So we have taken that, and to your point, you can't make people do it, but in our organization, we definitely have worked hard to encourage people to participate in wellness challenges. We've brought nutritionists in, done things to encourage people to attend to their health. And those that have, it's been fascinating to watch the positive impact it's had in their life. Because as we all know, if your health goes, everything else falls apart with it. On the relationship side, and it's a pretty personal story, you and I were having lunch and you asked me a question that was a very pointed question about my marriage. And I knew the answer on the spot. And you said, when are you going to have a conversation about that? And I did that night. And it's a personal matter. And my wife's a private person. I'll just say this about it. It positively changed the trajectory of my marriage. We'll be married 31 years this year. We met each other when we were 18. We're both the oldest. We had a lot of things kind of going against us. And I married way over my head. But that one question and that one conversation led to a much richer marriage today. And again, that has definitely, I believe, made me a better leader. I mean, in your experience, Tom, why do you think that? Because that's, as a business owner and entrepreneur, it's easy to take your relationships at home for granted. You're providing, you're doing this, you're doing that. And of course, everybody should support you in your efforts as an entrepreneur. And yet, you said it, you shared it with me, I've seen it. That's the first thing most people, they give up on their health, and then they give up on their relationships at home and take them for granted, take both of those things for granted. But relationally, why do you think there's so much power in that?
As I was listening to you talk, not to break away from the answering of it.
No, that's fine.
What I was listening for is what's missing in culture in those 5 areas, or in culture in general, is what I call, what's there is complexity. Like, the human body is very complex. And what's missing, and what great leaders do, is go from complexity to simple quicker than anybody else. So a great leader makes things simple. Whether you're selling stocks, bonds, insurance, or widgets, it's complex. Mm-hmm. You have to do the books, you have to meet with people, you have to deal with your emotions. And those are 3 of a billion things that everybody has to deal with on a daily basis. And what I had learned to do in the SEAL teams was make things, both as a leader and as an operator, take a complex situation and be able to deliver 3 things. And the reason why the book is titled 3 Simple Things is, if you can't, as a leader, make 3 simple actions possible, then you're going to make it very complex for your team. And as Tim was sharing, the 3 simple things in relationship are so profound that they're game changing. And in putting CEOs through the curriculum, and professional athletes and other people, everybody fights the simple. So here's the 3 simple things in relationship that will change your marriage or your love affair in 10 minutes. So try to spend 30 minutes a day. So 30 minutes a day for a month with a key relationship. So it's your wife or husband, or if they're dead, your kid, whatever. So that key relationship that you're actually committed to. And for the first 10 minutes, commit to listening to your spouse. Listen to them. Listen to what they're going through that day, what their goals are that day, and how it's all playing out. So spend 10 minutes listening. The second one is communicate really to your spouse. This is what I'm going to do today. These are the problems that I face. And communicate to them for 10 minutes. And then spend 10 minutes being intimate with them. Touch them, kiss them, hug them. And you can do this stuff virtually too. You can have intimacy virtually. For a CEO to do that, and that's a 30-minute tranche of time for a boss. It's not that hard to pull 30 minutes out. It has taken most leaders 3 months to do it for a month. So they can't do it. They break it down the whole week, then they got to start over. That will change your relationship. It'll change it. Actually, towards the positive. The listening and the intimacy has been the hardest for people to do. Most people then, hey, honey, this is what I'm going to do. See ya.
Very
so the spouse gets neglected. Mm-hmm. Gosh, Tim, man, I wanted to tell you what my day was like. Oh, he's gone. And boy, I feel alone all the time. If you give them that 30 minutes, they don't feel isolated, alone, or unavailable. It's transformative more to them than it is to the boss. And the rule of threes, if you don't give them 30 minutes, they'll demand 3 hours. And then you're going to be at a deficit. So if you go 7 days, they demand 21 hours. So it becomes a weird deficit that you can't make up. Give them 30 minutes to every key relationship that you have, and it'll change the relationship. And you could actually relate to everybody that way. So when your employees come in or your C-suite level, listen first as a boss. A dictatorial boss loses relationships so quickly that the team can't stay together. Like, I'm not being heard is the usual conversation of a culture when nobody listens. Listen, speak, and create some level of intimacy as a culture of relating to each other. And remember that just at the most, it takes 30 minutes. You could probably do it in 90 seconds if you're good at it. Mm-hmm. It's transformative, but nobody was doing it. And those 3 simple things, for me as an entrepreneur and as a coach, by making those things happen, the business was the easiest solution. Hey, we're trying to sell our business. Can you help us position to sell? No, what I'm going to first do is make sure the boss has a great life first. Then the business was the simplest solution.
And how much, I guess, pushback or resistance in the training you've done did you get initially from people? Because to your point, no, I want to sell the business. Why are we talking about my relationship at home?
Yeah, it was like pulling teeth from an angry bear. It's not important. I don't care about it. And it was probably more my learning curve of letting that be an exploration. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't do it. Yeah. If you don't do it, here's where it's going to play out. And it's pretty much a guarantee. If a wife stays in isolation for very long, fill in the blank about what's really going to happen. Either the man goes away or the woman goes away, or they get so separated emotionally from each other that you can't bring them back together, which is could be where most people are married now. I go home and I do my laundry. To me, that was the most remarkable part of retirement and starting this effort to transform the human culture was the relationship and the impact of that on an individual and a team I had not thought about in retirement.
Interesting. I mentioned at the beginning, you wrote a new book, which I think is I know it's coming out at the end of April 28th, already available on Amazon, 3 Simple Things Leading in Chaos. That's something you wrote a while ago, Thom. before the current situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and the entire world coming to a halt, and the virus spreading at a rapid pace and people living in fear. Talk a little bit about the book, and you expounded on the 3 simple things in a relationship, but maybe that whole concept of 3 simple things, and maybe we can share some tips on leading in chaos, and the entrepreneurs that are listening to this and or the people listening to this are living that right now.
I'm living it with the book right now. Total chaos. Actually, by talking to you and several of my really close friends that I've developed over the years. So I thought my technology was the secret sauce.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to expose the formula and the process and the method to anybody unless they pay. That was the position that I was in about a year ago. I discovered a map to the end of the rainbow, and I was holding on to it tightly. And maybe I had succeeded. In my brain, I had succeeded. And I had kind of all my friendships from the SEAL teams were gone. Not intentionally. I had moved on.
Yeah.
As I started reaching out to some of my SEAL buddies, the gravity of what I had kind of let go of hit me, that a bunch of the SEALs had lost their way and died, committed suicide, gone off the rail, and weren't available to the next stage in their life. And I had shared that with you and some other friends, and I can't remember which one of you had said, so why don't you just share it openly?
Give it away.
Tell everybody the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. And somebody had said, what happens if you die? Where's it going to go? I'm like, well, it's going to stay on my computer. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be bold. I'm going to put it all down as linear and process and method, how it happened. What do you do? Take this approach. This is the outcome, and put it into a book. So I had written the book, and everybody asked, what's the process of writing a book? I don't know. I just hammer the thing out until I can't do it anymore. And they originally intended to be published or launched in August. So the chaos part of the story is my publisher called up and said, we would like to move the release date to April so that people can be affected by the book during this chaos, which the title is 3 Simple Things Leading During Chaos. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I'm not done really writing the book yet. So I had to complete my task as a team effort to write a book. And I'll tell you, it's a team effort. And so now the release date is April 28th. The book's still being edited, and we're all in chaos. So I'm like, hey, I'm not in chaos either. I'm in this same condition that everybody else is in, trying to figure out and navigate this weird space, which I wanted to share that because everybody's in chaos now.
Everybody is in chaos.
Everybody. And we were talking offline. The world changed, and it probably changed overnight. Some people don't recognize it. Some people do. Some people are praying and hoping that it's going to go back to as is or as it was whenever this relief happens. My stand is that it won't go back perfectly. You pulled out a piece of the puzzle. You'll never fit that puzzle back in perfectly ever again, which is relevant to the conversation. How now do we as a culture, a collective culture, move into this chaotic space? I think the first element is recognizing that it's changed.
Yeah, it is different, and not putting your head in the sand and hoping you're gonna wake up tomorrow and it's gonna all be gone.
Some people, it's not really answering your original question, but how do you adapt now? What can you do right now in a simple manner that profoundly impacts everybody right now? So the right now is probably more important than the future.
Yep.
If you wait too long as a human being in one spot, the bus leaves and you'll never catch up to it. And what Stacy and I decided to do is, what can we do right now, not only for ourselves, but for our immediate environment. And not looking at it through the lens that we had looked at life. And one of our close friends is a restaurant owner, and restaurants stopped like overnight.
Yeah, overnight.
And they don't know what to do. They have employees that are hourly. The third and tertiary effect of a close down isn't nobody makes money. It's the life, the family of the hourly worker, the waitress mother who has, had gone through tough times, divorced, and has a kid. The impact is on the kid. And Stacy and I said, well, what can we do right now? So Stacy threw together an organization called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And a product of that was to begin to mentor and support the restaurant side to shift. So nobody's coming to the restaurant. How can we still make food and get it to people?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big initiatives that happened when you close down not only a restaurant, but a school, is that all those kids that were getting free meals can't get them.
Yep.
So we began to look at how did we keep this restaurant A open, make food, deliver to all these people. And that was a chaotic experience. Like, I don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Stacy and I had to do is, what's the 3 things that we can do right now? We have to be able to make food. We have to be able to deliver food. And the third thing is we had to find funding, because eventually the altruistic side of things wears itself out. Oh, boy, I know how to get funding. Not everybody knows how to get that.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to participate. So we reached out to some people who had some little more abundance of wealth than other people. They immediately participated in it. And there was an ask and a receive back and forth there. The business was able to stay open and the kids got food. Those are 3 simple things. It's not in my space. I don't know how to turn on a grill. You know what I mean? And so just by knowing that, pulling your head out of the ground and immediately adapting, looking at people as a solution was what we did. Now there's another Neighbors Helping Neighbors up in Minnesota with a close friend of ours that is actually running for the Senate right now, or Congress. He goes, I want to do that here. So we gave them the template and they're doing the same thing up there.
It's amazing. The adaptation and innovation that's going to come out of this era for those that, I think you hit on something really important there, which does ultimately even speak to culture in organizations. And that is, are you waking up looking for an opportunity to help other people? Or are you waking up and being concerned only about yourself? And what Stacy came up with there in a very short period of time really is having a positive and major impact on other people, and giving her, a sense of the place to put the energy that she has to make a difference in people's lives. So that's very powerful adaptation.
Oddly, we could do this virtually.
Yeah.
The paradigm of, we have to meet and you have coffee and then 2 weeks later take action. Virtually, you can actually take action very quickly, and it's immediate. For some reason, people actually communicate better virtually.
We're all getting used to it.
And then that shifted too. And you had said something, 2 weeks ago, that I went back to all my clients and told them what you were doing is you're going to communicate with every employee.
Yes.
How many bosses think about that? Especially when you have more than 10. 10 is a hard problem for communication. What if you have 700?
Man.
That's your job now as a boss, is over communication.
Yep.
And everybody took your lead and they're like, man, I hate to communicate over the phone. That's your choice. If you don't, they're gone. They're not going to come back.
Yeah, we've used every medium available to us, Zoom, Teams, the written word, phone calls. Again, what's amazing to me is how clear what is important has become in such a short period of time. And what really matters, I keep reminding myself and my team, is this is a human element dynamic we're in. This is about the humanity of all of us, not just obviously everybody's business. They're concerned about their business and how it's going to be impacted by what's going on economically. Yet, if there's ever been a time to attend to people as people, it's now.
Yep.
It's now. And I think
so. I have asked you,
that's always been the
response.
Case. I think the response overall has been very positive. It's been amazing for me to watch our team, leaders in our organization, how they've stepped up and really been amazing. One of the things that you and I have talked about before in business setting and how it can impact a business is drama. And the one thing I've seen zero of in the last 3 weeks is any form of drama. I feel like the work we've done and our leaders have done to develop themselves is coming back out of them like a river to serve not only the staff that supports our advisors, but our advisors. And that really is, I think, positioning our advisors to better serve their clients right now. I mean, if there's been a time in history, we've had a few, the last one being the financial crisis, where people are really concerned about their money. That's when they need a good financial advisor, probably more than ever, to kind of walk them through what's going on. And again, what I've seen is those people that stuck to the fundamentals as an advisor in their practice and have the right things in place. They're unsettled by what's going on, but they're much less impacted than those that did not attend to the fundamentals. So on the side of just the overall communication rhythm, we probably, as I have been fond of saying, you can't over communicate enough right now. I think maybe there's a truth that at some point you can. And you got to let people digest things. That was my discovery this week on Tuesday is, maybe it's time to pull the throttle back a little bit. But we've done everything, Thom, from, and again, it's funny, the virtual side of things, I feel like people are, we may be distanced from a physical standpoint, but our focus is on not socially distancing in the sense of losing that connectivity. And we do a town hall weekly now that I do. And we've enlisted some of our advisors to speak about what they're doing with their clients and the conversations they're having. We've got daily newsletter that gives a recap, and it's a different theme each day because we do manage a lot of money through our advisors for their clients. We've obviously got an emphasis on the market since it's going up and down at quite a clip these days. We're giving them tips on how to use technology. Again, it's amazing. We've been promoting technology for 2 years now. And of finding out who paid attention and who didn't, because some people know what Zoom is and know how to use it, and some people are like, "What is that?" And that's okay.
You didn't know how to use it.
Yeah,
here's your choice. You get one choice now.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing goes on new ways of doing business because everybody is virtual at this point. And knock on wood, again, this is probably going to be a long cycle deal, but so far so good. And I do think, honestly, the communication side of it has had a very positively profound impact and allowed people to stay connected. And I've done a lot of one-on-one Zoom calls with our team and advisors, just again, help them keep things in perspective and also walk them through some practical realities of what they might need to be focused on. Having been through myself, pretty significant business impact back at the last financial crisis, that personal experience shaped me forevermore and has given me something of credibility, at least, to talk to our advisors about, hey, this is the reality of what it's probably going to be like. These are some things you can do to deal with it, but you can't just hope it goes away because that's not going to happen. So it's been good. Like I told you offline, I think we're going to see 3 to 5 years of change get compressed into 3 months here. I'm optimistic, very optimistic about the other side of this thing, but just like a Spartan race or a half marathon or anything else that's hard to do, it's not going to be easy and it's going to be a little painful, maybe a lot painful for some people. Yet I think it's important to be realistic and optimistic at the same time. And anytime there's danger and crisis, there ultimately is opportunity. And I think finding ways to help everybody, because one of the things that's fascinating to me about this time is everybody's equal now. Anybody can get this virus. I know people that have had it, and it's indiscriminate in the sense that it could happen to anybody. And yet, to your point about, if you're a restaurant owner, it hits you really hard. There are other sectors of the economy that are booming. I've talked to business owner friends of mine that this has been helped their business in the sense that there's a higher demand for what they do.
Toilet paper.
Yeah, well, toilet paper, yes. Someday we'll figure out that. I have a feeling that had to do with some kind of social media story early in the cycle.
Yeah. Hey, social media, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Connectivity works.
Yeah. Or, that's the new currency. Who knows? But yeah, so I do think that the communication and connectivity can still happen virtually, probably needs to happen more now than ever. But I also do think what you and I have talked about over the years and what you've taught me about focusing on the building a culture of an organization, again, the people side of things, this time really that we're in today is just a reminder how important that is, even in good times. I think the other side of it is in good times, it's easy to get sloppy and undisciplined.
But yeah, that's the irony of, or the paradox of success is the more successful you are in any field, the more sloppy you get.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens during chaos, which is, I hate to say I have a proclivity for it just because I spent so many years in very chaotic situations, is during chaos, you only rely on basic things. You find out what really works and you have other things that you're thinking about, but you get down to the base level. And as you were talking in June or July, when this somewhat opens up and we're trying to get back to some kind of normal, there are going to be more opportunities than anybody can fathom. This is when billionaires are made.
Yeah.
If you can survive the downturn by keeping or getting back to the basics of your life and your business, there can be cuts. Like you have to cut out something in all the 5 categories that weren't effective anyway. Now you start from operating from a baseline. Opportunities are going to be everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah.
If you don't get, which I hate the term isolation. Mm-hmm. I know they don't intend that, but the social distancing is one way to destroy a culture. If we stay isolated from each other, we're stuffed as a race because humans require more intimacy than everybody's willing to admit.
Yeah.
And I learned to do that as a SEAL instructor. Here's how you make people quit. Isolate them from the problem. Take them out of the equation. And that's how I got people to quit SEAL training.
Yeah.
I could make the best athlete quit by taking them out of the equation. And they'll quit. They're like, I don't feel like I'm a part of it anymore. And they get into the darkness that they can't recover from. So as leaders, recognize that if you're not communicating, you're isolating. Don't isolate. Unless you want to get rid of the person. Don't call them because they're going to be gone in 2 days.
Yeah. The connectivity really becomes critical. And it's, to your point, it can be a challenge in larger organizations. And I'm not going to say we're doing it all right because I know we're not, but we're doing our best to be rapid in our response and to spread the load, so to speak, among the many leaders of the organization. And again, use different mediums and ways to connect with people. So we're learning a lot. And again, I think on the other side of this thing, and there will be another side of this in the future, there's some great lessons to be applied to everyday life and really refocusing on priorities, what really matters most in a culture ultimately. So this has been something I've been looking forward to for a while, is having this podcast. I got to be an early guest on your podcast, Unbreakable, and Navy SEALs Way of Life. We're going to put in the show notes links to you, Adamantine Alliance, and your books, as well as how people can get connected to you. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate our getting to do this together. Also say again how much I appreciate you as a person in my life, what you've taught me. And I think about what I have done with the work we've done and how I've been able to bring that into other people's lives and think ultimately the culture of our organization. And I would just encourage all leaders listening to this podcast, check out who Thom Shea is and really reflect during this time. What is the culture of the organization I want to have, whatever it is? And I remember the reckoning I had to come to when we started this exercise. It was kind of ugly in my mind as to what I saw. And it would have been easy to just say, oh, hell, this is too hard. I can't do this. Forget about it. But everything starts. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, again, that I think you teach well is you got to be in action in order to make change. You can't just sit there and dwell on things. So I do really appreciate the time. Love you, brother. You are an amazing person. And I look forward to getting a chance to read your latest book. I pre-ordered it on Amazon. So sounds like the chaos of getting that finished.
I can't wait to read it too. I haven't seen the final version.
Well, as we sit here, it's April 2nd. They got 26 days to figure that out. So.
I am humbled by every time it's so uncomfortable when somebody says something nice to me. I'm not used to it. Not that I am mean, but I learn more from you than I teach you. I always learn more, and it's been a rewarding experience yearly to graduate to a higher level in my own life just by knowing you, and I appreciate that. And I am happy at a different level that you and your wife are at the level that you are. That to me was the biggest reward, is that you have a life at home that you want to go home to.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but the business impact of what we worked on was exponential, not just additive. And I think in the Unbreakable Navy SEALs way of life, in the 5 pyramids relationship, you got to have your health, but if you have that and your relationship, everything else is going to almost take care of itself. So powerful lessons. This is Tim Flanagan. We're winning through culture. I appreciate having you on with us today, Thom. We'll put the ways people can connect with you in the show notes. And thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it and look forward to the next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you haven't already and feel so inclined, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you consume your podcast. And we really hope that you've enjoyed all the episodes you've listened to for Winning Through Culture.